What is going on, Sales Dev Squad? Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sales Dev Squad podcast. It's your host, Mateo Elvira, back with another episode for you guys. Today, we got a super special guest, Mr. Chris Walker, who's the CEO of Refine Labs. I actually found him through Patrick Joyce's podcast, which was really interesting. A lot of interesting thoughts around the idea of marketing and sales development, his thoughts on the future of customer acquisition, the most optimal way of getting customers to your business. But Chris, I'm excited to dive deeper, man, but thanks for joining us.
Mateo, really happy to be here, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I guess for anyone out there who's not too familiar with like you and your work and like how you kind of got into like business, do you mind just giving a quick run through?
Yeah, I won't bore people too much. We can get into the good stuff. But in essence, my career has stemmed from a couple key points. The first one was spending a lot of time in upstream product management, talking to customers and really understanding what they needed and understanding how to understand what they mean, because what they say directly might not be exactly what they're trying to say. And so it's our job to ask the right questions and then interpret what they're actually trying to say. So that was a big one. And then started a couple e-commerce stores, B2C stuff, Shopify, Amazon when I was early, right out of college, and learned a ton there about how to use your own money and run profitable digital advertisements, which is for a lot of marketers in venture funded B2B companies is a foreign concept. The next one was getting really good about taking all of those concepts that I used to sell blankets on Shopify and Amazon, and then using it to sell complex B2B products for several different venture startups. And most recently have taken that model and figured out a way to replicate and constantly innovate on it. And we currently work with 18 fast-growing B2B software companies predominantly throughout North America.
Nice. Thanks for that overview. I guess like just to kind of dive deeper, like when I was watching Patrick Joyce's podcast when you were on it, like completely changed the way that I feel like businesses should think about like what the most optimal way of getting new customers is. And it's probably kind of controversial in a way, but your thought process is cold outbound is not efficient. You can hire a bunch of sales reps to go out there and prospect and cold call and send emails to hopefully book meetings that hopefully turn into opportunities that hopefully turn into paying customers. Whereas your approach is more of like educating your prospects through content and media, which is something that's obviously growing in 2020, especially now. Like, I guess, like, how did you figure out that like there might be better ways of doing things or better ways of getting customers?
Yeah, first off, just to clarify one thing, cold outbound can work, warm outbound can work. Like those things do work. Most companies should do them. It gets easier once you have a brand and a product established. And so when I focus on companies that are 20 million, like 20 million in revenue, like you're not really there where you see that lift. Like Salesforce out, it's probably pretty simple to be running outbound in Salesforce for people that have an established brand. So not to say that you shouldn't do it. I think that most companies should. They just rely on it too much. It becomes their like essentially their main way of generating revenue. And unfortunately, their marketing teams are not doing a lot of the things that you had introduced in order to alleviate the strain on that part of the organization to generate all of the revenue, which makes it a very, very difficult job. And so the way that I figured this out was I was working as a demand gen manager and built a demand gen function inside of a $30 million company from the ground up. And before I did any of those things, I was riding with the sales reps because in a normal marketing role of where I worked, it was pretty much sales enablement and building trade shows. And so sales enablement involved when they had really large meetings going with them to be the subject matter expert on the clinical data that supported the use of our product. And so I went to those meetings. I flew from Boston to San Diego and Boston to Seattle to have the meeting with Seattle Children's or, Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And when I was at the meeting, like I could feel almost instantly that the person wasn't ready to have this conversation. You can feel it. Like I'm presenting the information makes perfect sense. And they are, for whatever reason, not open to receiving it and not interested in it that much. Like it's not something that you have to feel it. And so I went on a mission from there after I saw that at 5, 6, 7 in a row. I was like, this is not a good use of my time or the company's money or the sales rep's time. How do we get to a place where when we enter that meeting, this person knows all of those things already and we can help them buy something? And so then I started to really think about, okay, what are the things that they need to know? This comes back to being really a really good customer researcher, understanding what are the gaps between what the people know that believe in our product versus the ones that don't. The gap can be pretty wide for a lot of different companies. And so identify what are the 10 things that people need to know along the way. And then figure out how to package and distribute that information in a way that doesn't feel salesy, doesn't feel like advertising, and that they are receptive to. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure those different things out. Like, how do we help people learn on their terms and allow them, when they're ready to buy, that they don't consider us and 20 other vendors and we're in an RFP process and we're a number in a spreadsheet. How do we be the one where they go to Google and they say, I want this brand? And so in general, it's just building a brand.
Yeah. So it pretty much is like educating the customer on the front and kind of doing the legwork as you normally might do in like with a cold email or a cold call, which obviously it's a different environment, right? But like
Precisely. It's just it's a far more efficient and buyer centric way to do the same activity as opposed to one-on-one in a sales conversation when they're not ready to have it simultaneously with thousands of people and let them filter themselves through, right? Like,
so like how do you like develop like content around educating customers? Like obviously like I feel like sales reps and companies can kind of like get information like, oh, here are the gaps, but how do you take that and turn it into something visual, like a video? I know you're huge on video and content and podcasts. Like how do you get to that creative side and produce something like content?
yeah, I mean, the first step before we think about how to make the video in 1080p or how to clip it or different things like that, the first step is, how do you figure out something that you have to offer? How do you think about putting the person that you're trying to communicate with first, rather than just saying, hey, my stuff is so good? Like, I think even when it's masked behind stuff, a lot of sales reps that aren't selling to salespeople produce content that they pretend is in their buyer's best interest, but is really in their best interest. And so getting over that one is huge as a mindset shift. I think that the way companies set up metrics inside of sales organizations to be so short term prevent them forever doing something like this, prevent them from moving into a mindset that is customer focused. Sahil Manzoori has been putting out a lot of good
Yeah.
information about the idea that if you remove quotas and you pay, I don't want to be in the politics of the compensation piece, but just think about it for a minute. How do you set up your organization in a way where your reps can actually be buyer centric, right?
Yeah.
And so the first step is having something to offer them, ideally that doesn't lead to a sales conversation, that has something that's just for them. And then from there, you can figure out how to refine and distribute your message and package it, whether it's on video or written, whatever channel it's going through, email or, LinkedIn or whatever. But I think people get so far ahead of themselves that they don't actually take the first step, which is like, what am I trying to say here?
Yeah, like
And
what problem are you trying to solve? Like
I
what's
think
important to you
marketing is
guys?
uniquely positioned to be able to do that inside of companies because of the things that we just talked about. In
Hmm.
some companies, right? Other companies, they got to go and get 33,000 MQL so the SDRs can waste their time calling them. And so, some marketing organizations do have the space to do something like that, and their metrics are set up in a way where they can facilitate it. And so I would challenge people to think about how they could get that done inside of their company too, whether it's on marketing or SDRs, whether they fall in marketing and sales depending on the company, or the AEs.
So do you like who do you think this is like applicable to? Like I'm not sure if you watch any of like Gary V's content, but he's a huge proponent of just like leveraging like the power of content to build your brand or to like educate your customers. It's like something that you're really passionate and really good at. But like can like SDRs, start creating content that's applicable to like their prospects? Like, who is this applicable to at
Hmm.
all?
It's applicable to anyone that's trying to close business and develop business and move an organization forward long term. The CEO should be doing this shit. But when but when it comes down to it, I think that people just get a little bit like stuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like in 2020, like you've obviously been working on your brand and building your brand. Like, do you have any advice for anyone out there that like it just like wants to take
Hmm.
like that first step, like they don't really know what to do, but like they're open for it, and
Hmm.
they want to build their brand. Like, what
Yeah.
advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, when I started doing this, people think that I just like got on LinkedIn and then like magically got good at creating content and all this stuff happened. Like, I've been creating content since 2013 for the internet, and more so in a B2B setting since 2015. And I got really good at it in 2016. And the things that I did in 2016, when I wasn't an expert on the product. So a lot of SDRs listening to this are not an expert on the product, are not an expert on the market, are not thought leaders. And so there's two different ways you can do it. A lot of people like to write about being an SDR, but when you're selling to a physician or a CIO, writing about your day as an SDR is probably not going to get you a lot of business. So you have to decide here what you want to do. Now, what I did, since I knew that I had no level of expertise in neonatology and, intensive care medicine for the people that we were selling to, I networked and interviewed the thought leaders that were, and then was able to just control the flow of the conversation on side of topics that were important to the things that I wanted to communicate. Like, you don't have to be the one that's necessarily speaking all the time. And so that's what I did at first, because I just was self-aware that no one was going to listen to me if I started talking about that stuff.
Hmm.
Right. And so I found the best people, in Boston Children's Hospital and all these different places, and I interviewed them, and then I would send the 60-minute video out by email to tens of thousands of people that were in our Salesforce database, and would chop it up and sometimes run ads against, the 1 minute clip, sort of like how I do organic on LinkedIn. And over time just started to really figure that out. And when you go and you interview 20 experts, you develop knowledge very quickly about the topics that keep coming up, the questions that are getting asked, the type of language they use. If you study it, then you can learn a lot from those people really quickly. And then you can go back and write less intensive short form content, which I used in like blogs or short form written, like social. At that point, it was Facebook posts, and use the knowledge that you've built to create your own content. So the first step is you got to learn.
Yeah. Did you spend a lot of time doing that like research on like your prospect, and like how long was that process of you like gathering that information for you to be able to craft like or even think about a post, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that I don't think about them as prospects. Like, when I was going to do those interviews, and it's really interesting for people when you start to really like your intent of what you're trying to accomplish drives everything subconsciously. And so for the person that I'm interviewing at Boston Children's Hospital, my goal here is to create a good piece of content that other people want to watch. I have no interest in this person being my prospect or selling during this activity. And people will feel it if you have a different intent. I know that for fact. And so the goal is not to have this person be the prospect. The goal was to use their thoughts to create awareness about us and then the people. And that's the same thing that I do with my content. Like, I host a live Q&A on Tuesday evenings. We went for like almost 2 hours where people are just asking me questions, and like charge a lot of money for a 1 hour consulting session, just doing that for free for people, because, and I'm not trying to sell to any of them. Most of them would never, be able to buy from us or work with us, but we record the content. I help them at the same time. And then when I send the content out, that's where I get the value out of it. And I think, if you're able to make that distinction in your mind, that during this activity, we're creating content, right? Like, I don't feel like you're trying to sell me right now, right? But I get aware of you, and then you'll have this piece of content that you can put out.
Yeah. And I know like do you sort of use like micro content or like of this podcast? Like I guess how do you like make the most out of like a single piece of content? I feel like some people think, "Oh, we recorded this podcast. This is like one video and I can only post it once." Like what are some ways that you like make the most out of like all the content that you record and use?
Yeah, I mean, our approach is, I wouldn't say it's that sophisticated. I know that you could do more. I just choose not to because I know what the highest value opportunities are right now, given our resources. And so we'll record this. We will get the long form clip. The long form clip will go on YouTube, search optimized. I'm looking for 100 long tail views on YouTube. That's it. This is not going to be the million view video, right? That's not the metric that I'm measuring it on. And then we're going to strip the audio out and it's going to go on the podcast, which now has 52 episodes in the past 6 months, and is growing rapidly. So it'll go on our podcast. And then we'll take whatever short form clips and chop them up, and those will go on LinkedIn. And then all the different things that we talk about will then be fodder in my mind for written posts on LinkedIn. And I'm like, you could go further, and like some of it will go on the company page as well, but you could go even further and like have people write blogs about it and put it on your website and do stuff like that. And that's just like not, I don't find that to be enough of a valuable activity to actually do it right now. Like
Hmm.
I consistently like to stay focused on the things that work the best. And so like we have completely exited email. It was a lot of work for, I wrote emails, and I had a 500-person email list, and I spent 3 hours on a Sunday putting together a very thoughtful email for those people. And it's just like, I mean, I'm grateful that those people were on the list, right? Like, it's not like I'm giving up on them, but you got to focus on the things that have the most impact.
Yeah. So like do you spend a lot of time on Outbound or like
Zero,
what's
zero. We've never made an outbound phone call. I've never sent an outbound email. We ran one like $400 test on YouTube ads to just figure out what it was like. Other than that, no advertising expense. And like, no, we just, the the stuff that we sell is innovative. It requires a ton of education up front. I am not interested in chasing around thousands of people
yeah.
that are not interested in buying it. It's a waste of time. And I think a lot of people, depending on where your product is in the maturity curve or the category maturity curve, like you should think about that. If you have a really forward thinking, innovative product that requires a lot of education to move someone to change, then you might want to think about being more marketing led.
Hmm. Where do you think the future of Outbound is going? Like, I know that you mentioned, and I do agree with you that for certain companies, it should, like, especially younger companies that need to like make it happen right now. But like where is Outbound gonna be? I mean, it's already not the best converting channel, I would say.
Sure isn't.
And I mean, like, do you think it's still gonna be like a thing, or just do you think it's getting worse, or it'll stay about the same?
Mm, I think it's going to go in a bunch of different directions, right? Like then not like everyone's going to go in one place. There's going to be a camp of people that continue to ramp volume and scale garbage. That there will be a very large group of people that think that just because they have another piece of tech and they can insert some personalization tokens in there and do some shit and blast it to a million people, they think that's going to work. And it might work to get a couple customers, but it will not work long term. There will be
Yeah.
that group of people. There will be a group of people that are focused more on building awareness and then having a very like strategic approach to outbound. And I think that what I'm talking about is probably not what most people do, where like you're only sending 3 to 5 messages a week because you've done so much work up front and you know
Yeah.
that it's time, right? I don't think very many people will ever get there, but for higher ACV products, I think that would be an interesting approach. And then if you look far out into the future, who knows what's going to happen? But like buyers continue to have more and more transparency and more control. And I think the companies that lean into that instead of resist it, which is what most companies are, don't publish pricing, don't talk about pricing on the first call, don't show a demo on the first call, all this other shit just to move
Yeah.
people through a funnel, which
More
is
hoops.
completely not buyer centric. So the people that lean into being buyer centric and what buyers want, I think will be more and more successful over time. And I think that will move away from a lot of the spammy outbound that's happening right now.
Hmm. Do you think like SDRs should be, adopting or thinking? I guess my question is like, I think marketing should have a better idea of what sales is, and
For
sales should
sure.
have more of an idea of what marketing is. Like, how can we get people to think more in a marketing lens? Like, it kind of exactly how you do is like, it is the most optimal channel.
Hmm.
How can we get the best of both worlds, but have that marketing lens?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. And I became a way better marketer when I went on field rides with sales reps, when I called leads that came in through our website, when now that I've actually started to sell. I have a lot more respect and empathy over that entire process. And I've felt that way for the past 5 years, and it's been growing, right? Most marketers don't have that insight, right? And so when you start to have that insight as a marketer, you start to have empathy for what it's like when you push 1,000 MQLs that nobody wants to talk to down their throat. They don't want
Yeah.
that. They don't want that. Maybe you can celebrate that your metrics are. So like from a marketing standpoint, marketers need to understand it. I am very, very clear that you are going to be better at one or the other. That's just my stance. I think it will be incredibly rare to have someone that is an absolute all-star in both.
Hmm.
And so to me, completely self-aware, I'm a marketer. And so that's just the way it is. Like I can get it done in sales. There are plenty of people that are way better than me, and that's cool. On the sales side, I think that sales reps, I think this is a two-way street almost. It's almost like chicken and the egg, because the sales reps need to have more empathy and understanding for marketers, not necessarily be an expert in marketing, just like I don't want to necessarily be an expert in sales, but to be an expert in marketing and to just know what it's like. So when you go over there and you say, hey, marketers, we need 5 more leads, that you understand what it takes to get 5 good leads. Because people can push you a bunch of contact information at any point. I can go to Zoom Info and give you leads, right? Actually getting people that are ready to buy is hard. And so having that empathy, I think, is what salespeople could use as well. But to get back to like my core thought here is that I believe that there might be an overlap of activities, but the core responsibilities and the core expertise in those two things are very different.
Hmm.
And the metrics and the approach and the mindset are very different too. And so I think that you would have a lot of trouble if you merge the teams, which is what some companies are doing right now. I think you'd have a lot of trouble, because how do you break away the intent and the mindset between the two?
Yeah. Totally different. Interesting, man. Um, I know we're coming close to the end here. I guess like for anyone listening out there that's been inspired to like just consider like building their brand, or like start creating content, or just start thinking about the way they approach what they do differently. Like what advice do you have for them as they like continue with this like marketing mindset, or like this has sort of intrigued them and they like want to think about this a little bit more?
So, I mean, one easy thing is the Stated Demand Gen podcast that we publish. Like I said, there's 52 episodes up there right now. We're putting 3 to 5 up a week. It's available on Apple, Spotify, and all those other ones. I think there's a lot of key insights both in marketing, sales, and overall business strategy that is very useful to anyone that's probably listening to this. The second one is that I would highly recommend. It was so important for me, is to start some type of micro business, not to make money, but to develop business acumen, to understand how to use cash flow, to understand finance, to understand inventory if you're selling hardware products. Like, to if you're a salesperson and you're trying to sell a pair of shoes on Instagram, like, you're gonna have to figure out marketing. You're gonna have to figure out how to sell something on Amazon. And all of those things I found incredibly useful. Like the additional amount of business acumen that I have over my peers right now and before I started this company is extreme. And so like understanding the P&L and understanding how much it costs you to acquire this customer and whether or not it makes sense for the business to scale it. Like, I don't even think a lot of marketers really truly understand that whole equation. So I would recommend, the State of Demand Gen podcast, and also trying to figure out how you can up your game and overall business acumen.
Those are great tips, man. Appreciate it. I guess for anyone that wants to just learn a little bit more about how you might be able to help at Refine Labs, or just like connect on LinkedIn, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Chris Walker is definitely the best place. Yeah, that'll be a good place to find me.
Sweet, Chris. Well, thank you so much, man. Like I said, Patrick Joyce's podcast, when he had you on, it completely changed the way that I think about sales and marketing, and I really hope that this has inspired a lot of other people out there to just change the way they look, at least for maybe a second, and see if it might be, a more efficient way of doing things. But hope we can do this again, Chris. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you.